Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. Today's episode is a really awesome dude, Ridgely Goldsborough. What a name, right? Ridgely Goldsborough. Um, just one of the most intelligent guys I know. He has tons of degrees, has started dozens of businesses. Uh, he's a Buddhist. We dive into religion and all that as well, and his outlook on a lot of things. But just a really really great in depth combo. Something cool about him. He's a his I believe his great grandfather was an initial founder of Coca Cola. So he grew up with an immense amount of wealth. So we talk about some of the downsides that people may not be aware of when it comes to having an immense amount of wealth. So obviously, there's a lot more good sides. We all want to be comfortable financially, but I think it's always good to just look at it from the other side. And he had some really good insight on raising kids in a super wealthy environment. So great conversation. Hope you enjoy the show.
This is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
Make this thing happen.
All right.
I'm excited. Plus, we can
Ridgely,
catch up on the podcast, so it's all good.
We're live, man. We're live. You beat me to the punch. We were talking for people that don't know. I use a recording software, and we do video calls with Skype, and then the recording software for people that watch it on video. It puts our faces next to each other. Ridgely doesn't see that right now, but anyway, I pressed record right in the middle of you talking. But now people know how I record these episodes, and we're good to go. So anyway, we are live. Ridgely, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate that. I want to share with everybody that I'm deeply grateful to be here, Jeremy, because I recognize that this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, us being here right now in this very moment. And as such, I'm going to treat it as a moment of magic.
Well, those are very nice words of you to say about your appearance, Ridgely. So I'm very grateful for that. So we started talking about something right before the recording started, and I was like, let's hold off on that because I think that's a great topic to dive into. So the first thing I said when we connected on video call today was, you're always dressing nice, and obviously we've met in person. You wear nice jackets, always like red shoes, right? You used to wear those red shoes.
Yep.
You have very nice, very unique attire. Where does that inspiration come from?
So I wish I could tell you that it was some brilliant flash of genius or something, but it really wasn't. Here's what happened. I'm walking through Mexico City Airport, and I see a store. And in the window, I could see red suede shoes. And I thought, red suede shoes, man, that is cool. I need to get a pair of those. And I had to speak that night to a group in Mexico City. And so I thought, I couldn't probably do this in America, but in Mexico, I can wear red suede shoes because they're cool with that. So I wore the red suede shoes, and all these people came up to me. Hey, man, I love your shoes. What's up with that? So they invited me back about 3 months later to speak again. And I wore something else. And all these people came up to me and said, hey, man, where's your red shoes? Light bulb, ping, branding, marketing, pay attention, stand out a little bit. And it started at red shoes, and then it evolved to red belt, red workout clothes, red pocket squares, red glasses, red headset, anything red, and the color became red. And the thing that made it kind of effective is to dress up with using a lot of red. And now, literally, Jeremy, it's hilarious. People come to me at events like you mentioned earlier, and they look at me and they go, oh, it's Ridgely. And then they look down. Is he wearing the red shoes? And if I don't wear the red shoes, people give me endless flack. So I have back there in the closet 9 different pairs.
Okay. So what are you wearing now? I like that jacket. Is that denim? You're wearing a jacket over some nice shirt. What is that?
Yeah, this is a denim shirt, which is kind of like a more down home kind of feeling. But I popped it out with a nice tweed jacket and a little pocket square action just to pull it all together.
Where do you get your jackets made?
Actually, I know this is going to sound obnoxious, but I have an adopted mom named Suzanne, who for 50 years was a clothing designer.
Mm.
And so every year she makes me one of a kind clothes. So I have lots of one of a kind shirts and jackets and things like that that are made by my mom. So I actually don't have to buy them.
That's amazing actually because I don't know, not that I'm like a big fashion guy, but occasionally I do like a nice outfit and I don't think I've ever had a great sense of fashion, so I rely on other people to advise. So that's something you're able to delegate, and I'd imagine she enjoys giving them. Like that's a joy to give those to you, right?
Well, for sure. And I think she enjoys both the giving of them and the complaining about making them. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
that, oh man, this one was really hard. I did this and this and this and the way this shoulder is up a little bit right there. And okay, mom, cool. I'm glad you put so much effort into it and it gives you joy to do that.
So what's the most you've ever spent on a pair of shoes?
That's a great question. Not as much as anybody would think. The most I've ever spent on a pair of shoes, which I've done multiple times, is buying a pair of Gucci's, which are about 450. And the reason why I can totally justify spending $500 with taxes on a pair of shoes is because Gucci's last so long that you can resole them over and over and over. I had one pair of Gucci's that I resold 5 times.
Mm.
And they're
Wow.
so comfortable, man. It's like wearing a slipper. They're amazing.
Okay. Okay. I bought some Allen Edmonds that were in that price range, but I believe that's the most I've ever spent on shoes.
The funny thing about going shopping for Gucci's in Beverly Hills is that when you walk into the Gucci place, the first thing they do is offer you a glass of wine. So that as you're walking around Gucci, you're sipping on a glass of wine, which makes it a lot easier to spend more money. The longer you stay in there, the more toasty you get, the less the money matters. It's really smart.
Money doesn't matter. That's yeah, that is smart. That's I feel like that's starting to become more and more common in like premium. It's just it adds to the experience too.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't do that buying something online. So I think that's obviously where retail is going, right? You're not going to be able to compete on price from an online retailer. So traditional retail is going to have to come up with things similar to what you're referring to that will add to the experience that we can't get online.
It'll be like we walk into the store and they say, "Here, please take a seat here. Would you like a little back massage before we get going while we're making your wine for you?" I mean,
That's a great idea. I mean that's the type of stuff that's going to get people to start going in person. So are you a member of Board of Advisors anymore? Because I know that's where we met.
no, I actually was in, I will tell you, I was in four masterminds all at the same time. And I decided that my spending time away from home was a little bit much and I had to actually cut back. So I'm now down to two only.
What are the two that you're in right now?
One is called Flight Club, and Flight Club is a high-end online marketing mastermind. Guys in there, Mike Filsame, Roland Frazier, some of the really big hitters in the online marketing space. And then I'm in another one called JVology, which is run by Jay Facette out of Canada. Again, both of those are primarily online marketers.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so I'm not in Board of Advisors either. I very grateful was for those that don't know, or referring to a mastermind group called Board of Advisors. That's where we met. I actually started Mastermind about a year ago with Max. I don't know if you saw online or anything, but
Yeah, sure. I
we
saw some stuff about it.
we started Unicorn Mastermind, and then do you know who Tim Bird is?
Only by name.
So he owned an agency called AdLeaks, and he owns Facebook groups called or he owned an agency called Agency Y, and he owns a current company called AdLeaks, and he owns a couple big Facebook groups like the Facebook Ad Buyers Group and stuff like that. We ended up, he had a mastermind business, and then we had our unicorn masterminds, and we've always looked at our masterminds as more as like networking and expanding our reach, and adding authority in the space, right? So we ended up just partnering our two masterminds and creating the Founders Mastermind, which that launched in 2021. So,
and how's that going for you? Enjoying it?
Well, yeah, it's good. It's a lot of work, right? The unique advantage I think we have is, and I like the mastermind isn't our main source of income, right? So if somebody's not a fit or the mastermind, like we view it more for the long-term opportunity in the relationships. Obviously, we're not trading our time for free, so we want to turn a profit for our time. But one good deal and one good opportunity generated from the mastermind could very well net us more income than the mastermind does in an entire year,
Sure, of course.
So that's how we look at it, and that's why we're really investing in member experiences and not cutting corners and being really selective with who we let in, because it's not going to affect my lifestyle one way or the other if we have 5 mastermind members or 50 mastermind members. It's just, that's not our primary business. So it's going great. I mean, it's definitely a passion of mine. We have some great people that it's great to just get good people. It's internet marketing leaning. So there's internet marketers and e-com store owners. We do have some non-internet marketing people in there, but it's, 80% internet marketing. And it's, we've been working really hard. It's a really quality group. Happy about it.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way about Flight Club. I've been a member now for 3.5 years or so, never missed a meeting. It's the only thing that I've been a member of that I've never missed a meeting. Because the relationships, like you said, the learning is great, but the relationships are even better.
Are everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we cut some pretty big deals as a result of those, and I think that anyone that's out there, being in a mastermind is a really good idea, and finding the one that's a great fit for you is a really good idea, and hanging out with cool people like Jeremy is a really good idea too.
Hanging out with cool people like Ridgely too. So what? Yeah, for those again that don't know, the kind of the masterminds I feel are disproportionately popular in the internet marketing world, just because so many of us work from home or work remote. It gives us an excuse to get together in person. But yeah, essentially what it is, it's a premium networking and education group. Everybody pays typically a pretty premium price. Like Founders Mastermind this year, it's a $20K membership. We will probably bump that up next year, but it's $20K a year. So everybody in the room invested that to be there. And who knows? The thing about masterminds is who knows who to trust. There's still a lot of people that are full of shit, but at least it's a lot less likely they're full of shit if they invested 20 grand, right?
That's exactly right.
And people just care. I mean, I talked about that with a guest a few weeks ago. When people invest, you show up, you care. When it's something free, it's just, I don't want to go to another free event. It forces you to care more. So whatever it is, or whatever you're looking to do growth-wise, once you start investing in that growth, you will care a lot more. So
yeah, and not only that, it's the 20 grand plus you got to go somewhere, you got to get a hotel, you have expenses, you have whatever. By the time you're done, it could be a lot more than just 20. And you're right. For that reason, people take it seriously. They show up on time. They're there in the morning when the thing starts. They stay. They go to the functions in the evening where you do real networking. And a lot of business gets done. And it's phenomenal.
They're leaving their families in many cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've had to learn how to navigate. I never thought about being in the mastermind business. It's a question we actually we started asking people is, what do you typically like to see out of a mastermind group to be willing to leave your family, right? Because our ideal member isn't somebody that cares whether it's 10 grand or 20 grand or 30 grand. It's, is this the good group for them? So like somebody that I know is a good fit, we'll ask, like, what does it take? What do you need to get out of a mastermind for you to be able to leave your family? Because that's typically the bigger objection from what I've seen than whatever the price point is. So that's been an interesting learning experience for me. But so Ridgely, 2020, I know this was an interesting year for a lot of people. How was 2020 for you?
So, as a professional speaker and consultant, as well as running my own products, it started out as a phenomenally ridiculous year. I had high-paid speaking gigs, which for me are super fun, because the reason why a high-paid speaking gig is a lot of fun is because you walk in, do your best, wave, and your responsibilities are over. And there's no oh, I got to follow up, I got to do this, I have to do nothing. You're finished. And I had a gig that I'm now in retrospect grateful that I didn't get. I was going to be one of the keynote speakers at the annual Event Planners Conference in Orlando in front of 200 to 300 event planners that each planned 20 to 50 annual events. So think of the scope. If you do a good job at an event like that, you are then booked solid for the next decade. And COVID hit. And then it was cancel, 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 cancel. Every single thing was canceled. And we had to go to model number 2, which is, how are you going to continue to do your work from the comfort of your home? I was like, okay, let's reinvent ourselves. And it was interesting to go to the webinar model and to teaching through webinars and to learning that the only way you hold people's attention in today's environment is by being multimedia, going full-blown from commanding a room in person to slides, back to video, back to Ridgely, back to slides, back to story, back to video, back to thing, like you're a producer, right? And started to hit stride by about June or so. And 2020 ended up being a phenomenal year on multiple levels for me. Financially, it was great and no loss whatsoever. In fact, ended up far ahead of where I was at the end of 2020. But more than that, I started traveling, bro, when I was 6 years old, when my parents divorced. You know when I stopped?
Last year.
Yeah. And so I had a victory last week. I went to my doc for a checkup, blood work. I do it every 6 months. And he comes walking into the room and he said, your blood pressure's way down and your numbers are across the board better. There's not a single number you haven't improved on. Bad cholesterol down, good cholesterol up, sugars, everything, all across the board. I said, okay, so that's got to be because for the first time in my life, I'm at home, eating healthy, sleeping in my own bed, going to yoga 4 to 5 times a week. Life is good. And here's the crazy part, or maybe not the crazy part, maybe like the natural part. Bro, I'm never going back to being on the road 50% of the time. I'm not. I was on the road 50% of the time for years.
What motivated you to do that for that long? Because that just, you telling me that sounds exhausting.
Yeah. Now I'm like, hey man, I made one trip already this year to go skiing. It's the only one I've made. At the end of next month, I'll go to my Mastermind on the West Coast, come back, and have nothing else on the plans until like May, when I'm going to Mexico with my wife. Much easier living, man, I got to tell you.
Yeah, I can relate, I think, because I've gotten extremely the most healthy. I've probably been focused on my health the most, probably my whole life. And yeah, I've traveled way less. It's just, you get better sleep. Like, travel just fucks you up. You're traveling all the time. It messes up your diet, your sleep, your stress. Just like the amount of time just sitting, the stress from traveling, and who knows what like jet lag truly does to your body. I mean, our bodies aren't meant to be flying at speeds like that. So I mean, like, that's not even including like what jet lag does. Like, who knows? Like, maybe there are people that know. Actually, I could probably just Google it and see what the effects are. But it's just, yeah, your body doesn't feel great. You eat late meals. You just do a lot of things that don't feel good. And yeah, I can imagine years of that sound really stressful. So I'm happy for you that you did that.
Thanks, man. No, I mean, it feels really good to me too. My relationship with my wife is better. We're really close. We do stuff together all the time, and it's not like I'm leaving and she has to get used to me being back, and then she has to get used to me being gone, and then I got to do the same thing with her. And now it's kind of like, Well, yeah, no, I know you don't want to go to my mastermind because basically I disappear for the entire day and whatever. But other than that, pretty much anywhere we're going, she's going with me
That's awesome.
a lot.
You're in the Panhandle of Florida.
Yeah,
How far of a drive to Orlando again?
6.5,
Oh
six.
wow, I forget how big Florida is. That's wild.
No, you totally forget, man. You know how long it takes me to get to Miami? About
Uh,
11 hours.
it will. Yeah, I guess Miami's about 3.5, 4 hours from here, depending on. Yeah, that's insane.
I know.
Uh, so I want to. Can you recap just because I think it's a cool story? I know you're. Can you share the Coke story?
Yeah.
Not the cocaine story. No, I'm just kidding. The Coca-Cola story. Can you refresh my memory because I think that's awesome. Like that was also like a key thing that I remembered. I'm like the red shoes and being a part of Coca-Cola. Can you share a little bit about
And
that?
that's most people, when they see the red shoes and they hear the story, they assume that the red shoes came from Coca-Cola. And in essence, maybe subconsciously on some level, but the story I told about Mexico City Airport is exactly what happened. So, yeah,
Mexico
no,
is where the best Coke is because it's the real sugar, you know. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah. So, no, so my background is kind of unique. My great grandfather was a dude named Theodore Hamilton Lastly, and he founded two divisions of a little bottling operation called Coca-Cola. As a result of which, when I was a kid, we grew up surrounded by enormous wealth, controlled by my grandmother primarily. In fact, my grandfather, whose name was George Goodwin Ridgely, when I was born and my parents had named me Nicholas Goldsborough, held me in the palm of his hand and said to all those assembled, "He will be called Ridgely." And nobody argued with Doc, his nickname, because Doc was the patriarch of the Coca-Cola fortune, and everybody towed the line, or else, kind of thing. And it turned out that my grandfather passed away 3 months later, so he gave me his name, checked out. And then I grew up with my grandmother, Theodora Lastly Ridgely. So you can imagine, Theodore Hamilton Lastly was my great-grandfather, her dad, and her name was Theodora Lastly Ridgely. And she would send her chauffeur at Christmas time or whenever to pick us up. His name was Thomas. He had a black Lincoln Continental stretch limousine. And we would roll up Ridgely Avenue, not named after me, obviously named after my grandfather, Doc, to the top of the hill. And there was my grandmother's mega mansion called Dreams Landing. You'd walk through the front door of Dreams Landing and say hello to all the people assembled there and into what my grandmother called the Great Room, which is where she presided and held court. And we would find her generally sitting on her throne-like chair, smoking cigarettes out of a gold cigarette holder, with her Yorkshire Terrier named Tippy on one side, her white Pekingese named Teacup on the other side, and two parakeets flying around the room named Tuesday and Wednesday after the days that they were picked up from the shop. And behind her was a floor-to-ceiling glass wall overlooking formal gardens with a swimming pool so large that I had a sailboat in it. Yeah. You can't really make that shit up, right? Just say it. I mean,
Yeah, I
so
mean
we walk in there, huh?
that's unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, we'd walk in there and give my grandmother Gaga a kiss on each of the cheeks, and within about 30 seconds, she would say, "Run along, children. Your gifts are in the playroom." And she would kick us out of the great room. By the way, all rooms at Dreams Landing had a name. The great room was her place. The playroom was ours. And she would kick us out of the great room like we were a piece of trash. Because in my grandmother's world, children were to be seen, but not heard. So we were like, pew! We're out of there, man. She's weird. Booked down to the playroom, massive pile of gifts all selected by Thomas the chauffeur in the back of the limo. And with so little love or emotion attached to any of it, we'd rip through the gifts, throw the toys into the corner, and use the cardboard to create forts and tunnels and castles because child's imagination is remarkable. So it was pretty weird. I was always,
Yeah.
why is my grandmother so strange? Why didn't you want to play? Why didn't you want to bake cookies like normal people?
So that I want to ask you a question about. Actually, I'll just ask that right now. What is something? Obviously, there's a unbelievable amount of privileges that come with being that level of wealth, and I think a lot of us entrepreneurs aspire to that. And I think, it shows us like, hey, if you work hard enough and you create a big brand, you can kind of accomplish whatever you want, right? But what do you think are some challenges and downsides of that amount of wealth that maybe the typical person doesn't understand?
Yeah, no, I think they're quite significant, actually. So I'm going to make a ridiculously bold statement, and obviously make sure you remind me to share what happened to that fortune, because that's a pretty interesting story too, right? I believe that outside of a physical ailment, whether that's a physical, mind ailment or body ailment, the single worst thing that can happen to a human being is to be born rich. The worst thing, not the best thing, the worst thing that can happen. Because wealthy people, really wealthy people, don't learn how to fight. They don't learn how to stand up for themselves. They don't learn how to overcome obstacles. They just pay people. And I'm not even kidding. It's like, oh no, somebody will handle that. Call the lawyer, call the accountant, call the fixer person, call somebody, get rid of that problem. I don't need to have to deal with it myself. And my assistant will deal with it, my so-and-so. And growing up in that environment, I think is horrendous. Which is why you find very few multi-generational entrepreneurs, because it's generation one makes it. Generation two's kind of learned from generation one. So sometimes there's a nexus, sometimes there's not. And by the time you get to generation three, it's all entitled and privileged kids that don't know how to fight. And to me, while this may sound silly, you don't find a lot of wealthy people who are professional athletes, for example, unless it's polo, right? Why? Because you have to fight to be a professional athlete. You got to try really hard. You got to be willing to fail all over the place. And I really believe that being born rich is among the single worst things that could ever happen to a person in terms of becoming happy.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I have heard before that statistically, people that work paycheck to paycheck are happier than wealthy people, because that gives a sense of purpose.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, it's crazy to think that there are people out there who don't have to work, who can just kind of be and hang out. And you'd think, oh, well, they can just do happy things all day long. Really? Where's the meaning in that? Where's your purpose? Where's your raison d'etre? What are you contributing to this world? If you don't have something where you're trying to make a difference and have an impact, bro, I don't even know what that looks like.
What do you think? Because obviously I'm working really hard now. So whenever I have a family one day, they will have a really good life. What do you think, after your experience, people that do well financially should do to make sure their kids still have that bit of fight and purpose?
I think you really got to find something for them. And I think it's hard. Like, I have two biological kids, and my son is kind of really trying to find himself. I will share with you, because it's not a secret, he's decided he's not speaking to me at the moment because I stopped sending him money. I was like, wait, if you don't have a plan, and I'm willing to send you money, but you got to have a plan. You got to do something. There's got to be a plan here of some kind.
How old is he?
He is 21.
Okay.
So plenty of time left. He's young. But then my daughter is the youngest ballerina in the Los Angeles Ballet Company. So complete opposite. Super. I'm not suggesting my son's not motivated, but it's been all over the place for a long time. Whereas my daughter is super motivated. Otherwise, she couldn't be the youngest ballerina in the ballet company. Straight A student across the board, kind, and super hard on herself. Hard to see how that all came about as I look back on things. But I will say that probably because I was a little bit more seasoned when she came along, I gave her more opportunities to do very difficult things. And I think that's part of it, man. How can you put somebody in a situation where they have to thrive to survive and get that learning under their belt? I think that's key.
Yeah, and congrats. I actually support the decision for you not giving your 21-year-old money. I mean, it's obviously your call and you can do what you want, but I think that's probably the only way he's gonna learn. Just what I know about. I was young at a time, and I feel like if I would have had stuff given to me, there's no way I would have worked as hard.
Well, that's right. And I think that, realistically, I was troubled enough by, you know, some things that were said to me by my son that I went to find out more about this particular situation from a therapist. And the therapist said to me, I wish I could tell you that this was uncommon. It's not at all uncommon. And what's happening to you is completely normal. And oh, by the way, there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. So therefore, just chill out, relax. And when the time is right, your son will come back and you'll have a different kind of relationship. And then I talked to several other high-level CEOs, and they had this exact same thing. One of them 2 years separation, another one 6 years. And now they're fine. But I do not regret that decision to cut all that off. And by the way, it wasn't a decision I made lightly. It wasn't a decision that happened fast. It was something that was gradual until it was like, enough. No.
Yeah, not that I'm a mental health professional, obviously, but I would have to imagine that eventually he'll understand and support the decision.
I hope so.
It is interesting how, as at least I can speak for myself as a young man growing up, just like how relationships with your parents shift over time. And I'm sure you've experienced like how different they act, how different he acts compared to when he was like 6 compared to what he does now. But I think my late 20s is when I started getting a better grasp of things like that, like what my parents did and what my grandparents did. Obviously, everybody matures at a different rate, but that's when it happened for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I hearken back to, I had a unique job all through college and law school. I was a ski instructor on the weekends. And I thought it was super fun to go up and ski and get some exercise and get paid for it. And there were other fringe benefits in terms of people you met that were fun. And so when I was bringing up my kids, I took them skiing quite a bit. And I remember teaching my son how to ski. And I remember when he had the moment. The moment is when you freeze on the slopes because you're in something that you feel like you're over your head. And almost anybody that's been skiing has had the moment. And it was, he was 11 years old. And it was one of those, I got this, Dad. I'm going down a black. Take me down a black, Dad. Son, I don't think you're ready. Dad, I'm totally ready. Da, da, da. We go over the hill. It's called Geronimo. It's nice and easy until it went like this, and he had the moment. And then I look up, and he's frozen, and his lips are quivering, and the tears are sparking out, and I'm like, okay, great. So fortunately, I've been through this before, so I had to ski down a black diamond slope backwards, telling my son, don't look down, son, just ski to me. Just ski to dad, backwards all the way down, right? Fast forward 7 years. I'm graduated from high school, which was a war and a half. What should I do? Well, son, I think you should go be a ski instructor. So I contact the head of Sun Valley Ski School, get him a job in Idaho because they didn't have any dope there, at least not legally. And I thought that was a good idea. Off he goes to Sun Valley. Well, after skiing 135 days or whatever he skied that year, I go out there to see him. And now he's Mr. I'm better than you. Watch me do a flip off a bump, Dad. See if you can catch me. I'm like, you probably don't remember Geronimo, young man. The only reason you're where you are right now, skiing like a badass, is because of me. I'm the one that taught your skinny butt how to do all that. So I guess you forgot that piece. Maybe you'll remember after a little bit.
Yeah. For again, because I can speak for myself, men specifically, like ego is definitely something that gets in the way and something that I've done my best. What I've learned is we can't get rid of our ego. We just have to be aware of it. So when like thoughts or things you want to say come up, you just have to be like, this is my ego. I'm going to have to, this is not who I want to show up as in real life though, but acknowledge it. Right. And that's been the key is I think, and this thoughts in general. And I've had this conversation with people about like racism and everything. It's just like, we're going to have thoughts, but it's like do our actions need to correlate with those thoughts? And that's I think the growth into just an evolved human is to be able to be like, hey, that's my ego, that's my pride, that's my fill in the blank. That's not who I want to show up as in the world. I'm glad I caught it before that came out of my mouth or this action happened or whatever. You said you talked with your therapist about your son too. Have you guys ever talked about, because like I've been on this relationship attachment style kick these last like month plus and just learning about that, and I've talked to my therapist and I've done a little bit of research. So you've heard probably that based on how your childhood is kind of it forms a lot of who you are and who you show up or how you show up in relationships. Like you've heard that before, obviously, like based on your childhood. What new research is starting to show is that that's part of it, but part of it is also just natural, and how the natural component of it is much larger than we've historically given credit for. And I wonder if something could just be going on similarly with kind of like your daughter and your son. Like maybe like you maybe could have done some things better the first time around and you were more experienced, but it may not be much of your fault at all. Maybe it's just some people are born different ways with different things. You know, we're just all like, there's so much about our mind no one knows. Like how we're born, like how certain people are born entrepreneur. Like my parents weren't entrepreneurial. They didn't go to college. I didn't go to college either, but I was super entrepreneurial at a young age. I don't know where that came from. No one knows. But like, is that something chemical in my brain? Did I learn something at a young age? Did I, like, where does work ethic come from, especially at a young age? Like, why do some kids have it and some don't? Like, there's twins that one will have this amazing work ethic and be this great person and the other one won't be, you know? So it's like, I wonder how much of it is natural. Like,
well, what's crazy, man, is if you kind of look around and kind of poll your relationships and your friends, one of the things that I've noticed is that in a family where there are multiple kids, more than two, 3, 4, 5, however many, there's almost always the one who is considered the black sheep or the outcast one that's off doing their own weird thing or doing not a lot of nothing or whatever that may be. And I've actually noticed in successful families, it's usually about a 50-50 ratio. Like in my family, there are 4 kids, my siblings, right? 2 of us, very successful, 2 surviving in their very own unique ways. But I mean, the difference is astronomical. And you're like, what happened there? Why did those 2 end up not reaching the level of achievement and success as these 2? And as I've surveyed and paid attention to other families, once in a while you'll get the family that's a bunch of superstars. And of course, there are many families where there's no superstars. But it seems like there's always kind of this weird balance. And I wonder, like, is that what you're talking about, that natural thing playing in more than maybe we're aware of? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it has to be, because there's so many different types of people that come from the same household. And obviously there's some traits, like typically the older sibling will be like a little bit more responsible because they were trained, not that necessarily that's who they are in their natural form, but they were just trained from their childhood to be more of a caretaker and be more responsible because they just had no choice. They were just told to. But yeah, I think just from what I'm starting to learn about like childhood and like relationship stuff, we tend to just try to look for a solution and a reason why for so many things. And I think that's great. But there's so much about like natural human biology in our brain we just have no clue about. And the more that I am starting to like go down this path, I feel so much of it is just sheer chance and just natural traits.
Well, if you think of the idea of IQ versus EQ, right? IQ, or intellectual quotient, basically intelligence, innate, raw intelligence, is something you come in with a certain amount of. But EQ, your emotional quotient, is something you can develop. And at the end of the day, I would rather have a few people being on my team that have really high EQ. In other words, they're determined to win and they're really working on that, than really high IQ, natural ability with not a lot of determination. And I think the piece that is maybe missed by a lot of folks is that you can build your EQ. You can build your muscle to win. You can develop good habits. You can listen to podcasts and learn from people who are succeeding and emulate what they're doing. And then you can incorporate it into your practice, whatever that practice may be. I happen to be a Buddhist, so I chant every day, and that elevates my life state. But what else does it do? Forget Buddhism. Any form of prayer is focused thought. So if I take the time to focus my thoughts on goals and dreams, it only stands to reason that I'm going to have a greater likelihood of succeeding on those goals and dreams than the person that doesn't.
Yeah. No, so, and I actually agree completely, by the way, and just so if you see me, I was looking over, there was a couple things I wrote down I wanted to bring up, and it's like a good transition here. But is your wife a Buddhist?
Yeah.
And did you meet that way, or did you convert together?
No, I started chanting literally 38 years ago, and I brought her into this practice 15 years ago. She converted after she was dissatisfied with her religion at that time and saw that this concept of total responsibility and it's all on you was actually an attractive concept. Some people are a little afraid of it, but I kind of like having the idea that I'm responsible 100%, 100% for every aspect of my life, bar none. And therefore, if there's something I don't like about it, it's up to me to do something about that piece that I don't like. And it's not anybody else's fault ever.
I align with that. That's my personal accountability kind of libertarian view mindset. So I align with that completely. Maybe Buddhism is the religion for me. I ask you this because, like, what is your opinion on having the same religion and being married? Do you think it's a necessity? Do you think that, like, it's possible to have different religious views and have a successful marriage?
100%. I know it's possible. Because in our Buddhist philosophy, there are many marriages where only one person practices Buddhism. And now, what I've found is that the ones that I have the most respect for, because I can think of half a dozen right off the top of my head, is where whoever is the non-practicing person is supportive of the practice. And I think that would apply to any religion. Like, let's suppose that you were married to someone who is Jewish, but you are not Jewish, and they were okay with you not abiding by certain Jewish customs or whatever, then you could go to synagogue and be totally fine and come home and have breakfast together or whatever. I mean, in other words, I think the only requirement for a marriage to be successful based on different religions is a respect for whatever the other person believes.
Yeah, I agree completely with that, actually. I was just talking to this lady, and she didn't like, because I'm, in that agnostic, atheist, spiritual realm. I've just kind of carved out what makes sense for me at this point in my life. And she didn't like that I really wasn't into the Bible, and we didn't call our God the same thing, and so we just parted ways. I thought I was extremely closed-minded. Because I would, if someone was a good fit, which it's hard enough to find somebody that you get along with from an energetic standpoint and a moral standpoint, like I wouldn't care what religion they are. You know what I mean? Like I don't like it's hard to find amazing just people in general in life. So it's probably not a fit just based off that closed-mindedness, because I don't think it's not like she was trying to convert me or anything, but I don't think the right fit for me would have that narrow view of, like, I look at religion as like a title in religion, as it's just so surface. It's like, but everybody has different views, and I'm sure your exact way of operating is unique to you, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So anyway, I wanted to share. I thought it was interesting. I think just aligning on a deeper level beyond religion is makes sense for me. I think that's very close-minded to anybody that wouldn't have a romantic relationship just based off of, oh, I call my God this and this is the Bible I read. We're not going to be a fit. Like, it's kind of,
Well,
yeah.
you know what I find is I have friends in many, many different religions, but I don't choose to spend any time with people who don't care about something. In other words, I am not going to spend, their time is very precious. I really do believe that every encounter is a once in a lifetime experience. And I hold that intention with every phone call I make, whether it's a sales call, a servicing a client call, or getting on a podcast with a brother and discussing philosophy. Doesn't matter. The people that I'm not going to spend time with are those people who don't care about something. In other words, you got to stand for something, care for something, have some passion and some deeper beliefs, or you're just not the kind of person that I want to spend time with. Because I'm interested in different viewpoints, happy to discuss anything with anyone that has a viewpoint. But if you're just kind of hanging out through life, not my kind of people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's why, like, politically, I know it's like a little bit of a shift, but I respect politicians that, in my opinion, even if I don't agree with them, that I feel like are truly authentic and passionate about their viewpoints. And there's not that many of them, but I would say like a Bernie Sanders. Don't agree with him on everything politically. Some stuff I do, like legalization of drugs and things like that. But economically, don't agree with him. But I feel he's very authentic and he's passionate, and that's what he truly believes, right? And I again, that's one of the reasons I started this show. Like, I respect authentic, open discussion of people of all different types of viewpoints. I'll have somebody further right than me, further left, different religion. Like, I don't. There's enough common ground where. So yeah, I agree completely, and I never thought of it that way, but I feel like a lot of my closer friends do have that theme in common. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think in that sense, we do vibe together, right? We've always had great dialogues. You and I, whether it's in person at the Mastermind or over the phone or just catching up with each other, it's never, hey man, how's your dog? What shows are you watching?
I hate that.
Hey, have you been to any good restaurants recently? I mean, really, man?
How is the traffic? Like, I like joke, like, my close friends know this. Like, I hate talking about traffic and weather and all that. It's just me saying the word weather right now. Like, all right, I'll take a step back. Something I have been getting better at is my presence and really just being like, wow, this is a nice breeze out today. And just like in the moment, paying attention to how my body feels. What does outdoor smell like? Even though after I got COVID, I still don't have my smell completely back. And that was like 5 months ago. But what does it smell like? What are the sounds outside? So I would say that is okay. Like, what's going on in the world around me, rather than just like being on my phone and playing around, just like being present. But yeah, just like elevator small talk. Oh man, it like disgusts me. I can't do it.
No, me either. And not only do I not want to do it, I choose not to do it. And it's a wait a second, if we're going to have a conversation, let's have a meaningful conversation. Otherwise, I'm not your person. I'm not the guy. The only person I'm having a light conversation with is my granddaughter, and she's 3.
And even her, as soon as she's old enough, we'll be getting to those deeper conversations. At what age do kids start having? Do they really start having like philosophical thoughts? What would you say? Like where you're just like, wow, that's a pretty profound thought. What age do you think that is?
6.
6. Okay, I'll keep an eye out for that.
And my reasoning for that is because I'm very blessed. I have 3 grandkids from my 2 stepdaughters and from my second marriage. The oldest one is 6. And just recently, he's been having more philosophical conversations with me. So this is only my personal experience from one subject matter person. So I have no idea if that's just pure speculation or if my grandson is either ahead or behind. I'm not sure.
The number I had in my mind was 5, so we're not too far off. That was just my educated best guess, right? So yeah, I think that's I think kids are the definition of authentic and outspoken, right? And that's like a lot of the personal work that like I've done and if you just look at like a kid, they'll say what's on their mind. They'll dance if they like the song. They'll laugh if they think something's funny. They'll hug their friends if they see them. They'll be happy if they're happy. They'll cry if they're sad. They're just present and they're honest with their emotions and their feelings. And then we generate these masks, no pun intended, with the 2020, all the masks everybody's wearing. But we generate these masks when it's just like, we can't be too happy, and when it's not in the right setting, we can't show emotion and cry, and it's just that. By the way, I don't know if you ever watched the documentary Heal on Netflix, but suppressed emotion and stress is what these just modern Western, or I guess like Eastern medicine doctors believe correlates with cancer and severe sickness, is things like suppressed emotion and stress.
It's funny because I do believe that, to your point, there's always another level you can get to in almost everything. And I've been practicing yoga for many, many years, but I never had the bandwidth to go to yoga 4 or 5 times a week, like I have been for the last number of months. And for the first time after decades of practicing yoga, I'm actually hearing what they're saying when you pay attention to your breath. Breathe. Pay attention to your breath. What does that really mean? Well, when you start out doing yoga, you're having a hard enough time paying attention to where your feet go and your arms go and which way goes up and you're upside down and you're in kind of contorted positions and what have you. Well, after a while, now I can start to pay attention to my breath and find that there's actually significance in the breath. In the same way as you were saying earlier, I don't want to talk about the weather, but I do want to notice if there's a nice breeze outside when I walk outside. And I remember being on an airplane, and I was blessed enough to sit in business class, and I sat down next to a religious person, spiritual leader, and he said 2 things to me that have stuck with me ever since that one conversation. He said the first one was, the world is run by people who show up. I love that. The world is run by people who show up. And the second thing he said, which I thought was equally brilliant, is, and if you're going through hell, don't stop. I love that. If you're going through hell, don't stop.
What does that mean, don't stop?
As in keep moving so you get through hell. Right? So that you're not stuck in hell.
Don't give up in the middle of hell.
Yeah. It's okay. You're going to have, if you're a human being, you're going to have days that are more interesting than others, more challenging, more unique. Years, 2020, that are more unique than others. But couldn't that be the time for a pivot? Certainly was for me. My life is forever altered to the positive by the coronavirus. Now, not that I don't have all the empathy in the world for everyone who suffered as a result of that. I have family members and people that have passed on, et cetera, as do most people in this country, know somebody. But I can say we took the moment, showed up, made the best of it, And when we were going through hell, we didn't stop. And now we emerged on the other side. It's now been about a year. And I look back to what it was a year ago, right before this, and say, man, this is remarkable. What a huge difference.
Yeah, I share a similar viewpoint, and there's something too, and not that a lot of people didn't have a lot go wrong in 2020 in a lot of years. Just a lot of things, a lot of times people go through bad stretches. But I can't remember who I was talking to, but we were talking about 2020, and this person was saying that it was one of the best years ever. And I was like, what happened? And he's like, well, unfortunately, and again, I can't quote exactly on this, but I think it was at my mastermind. I think we did a mastermind meetup in December. I can't remember which one of our members was talking about this, because during those few days, there's just a lot of conversations. But he's like, well, unfortunately, my mom passed away. He's like, but what happened, I got to spend quality time with her. Because of that, I had to like quit my job and start doing stuff I was more passionate, because I wanted to be with her. And it ended up, we got to spend good quality time together, and now I'm doing something I love and I'm passionate about. And it's just like, you could have viewed that, he could have said 2020 was the worst year of my life, my mom died. Or he could have said 2020 was amazing in a lot of ways. Obviously had a huge loss, but that shift is going to, set me up personally and my family and people I love for the rest of my life. Right. And so I think that's just what I'm bringing it full circle. I think successful minded people are able to just look at even the most challenging situations and say, I think there's a lot of positives to take out of it. I mean, it even happened for us in business. And Q4, we were projecting, I'm partners in a political collectibles business. So as you can imagine, I don't know if you heard, but there was a big election in Q4 and a lot of crazy shit going on. We were going to do record revenues. We were all so excited. Facebook and Google basically banned all of our traffic. Parler got shut down. So we were projecting X in revenue. What we actually hit was probably 1/5 X, and we were devastated. But I've looked at that and I'm like, now we've added new traffic channels that we weren't preparing to do when we were just relying on Facebook and Google. We have all these random traffic channels. We're adding affiliate revenue. So now we're coming out of the dust with a way more diverse business model, because we're not just relying on Facebook and Google. So it's like, I can just complain that Facebook and Google fucked us Q4, or I can say, hey, thank God Facebook, or thank the universe for me, that Facebook and Google did this, because that was kind of bad business of us just to rely on those two channels. And now we have 6 channels bringing us traffic, and now Facebook and Google are loosening up restrictions, and we're starting to get back to normal there. And if that wouldn't have happened, maybe we'd just still be relying on Facebook and Google. So I guess the point is, I think it's a successful mindset to just look at even the toughest situations. You can be a victim. We can all be victims about stuff. If you and me brainstormed here for 10 minutes, I'm sure we could both find things that we could sell us as being victims. Or we can just write some of the positives that have happened. And just that slight mindset shift is huge. It's been gigantic for me. And even if it's completely full of shit, it makes me feel better and it makes me happier at the end of the day. So even if it's placebo, that's fine.
Well, let me tell you something. Let's break that down, man. Let's go really deep on this. Can we go deep on this? Can we just jump in the rabbit hole and just go?
Can you talk about the weather first, though? No, I'm just kidding.
Sun will come up tomorrow. Okay. So here's the thing, man. Because people ask me this about my practice of chanting. How do you know it really works? And my response is, I don't have to know that it really works. If the results are right there in front of me. And here's what I do know. If my life condition, my life state is high, then I see through the eyes of a high life state. If my life state is low, then I see through the eyes of a low life state. The high life is optimistic, opportunistic, and has a very poorly developed memory in terms of the bad stuff. The low life state is pessimistic. You see the eyes through fog as opposed to clarity, and therefore you don't really want to try that hard. So it really doesn't matter if there's somebody out there that could find some objective measure to being in a better mindset than a lower mindset. The reality is it's going to make a huge difference no matter what.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that type of thinking is, in my opinion, like if you look at religion as on surface as like the training wheels, it's like this type of thinking is that like much deeper spirituality, just in my opinion. And there are scientific, there is, I didn't go to college, Ridgely, like you. You have all these degrees. I don't know how to speak English sometimes. There is scientific data to support placebo. So even if it's all full of shit, I'm open to that. That's still okay because, I mean, there's data to support that thousands of people in like World War I's lives were saved because of placebo. You know, American troops survived because they ran out of medicine and they told them they were getting medicine, but it was actually nothing, or a sugar pill or whatever it was. I mean, there's tons of data that supports placebos working. So even if it's just placebo, even if the universe or God, whatever, it's still beneficial to your health and to your mind and to your body. And I don't I don't care what it is as long as it feels good for me.
Well, and as long as it's working for you, right? Because at the end of the day, the ultimate game is mastery over self. Happiness is all about mastery over self. Can you master enough of the stuff so that you walk around with a smile on your face? And I got to tell you, man, I am a huge believer in having practices, habits, rituals, whatever you want to call them, that contribute to that. Like go to yoga or go running or go for a walk or go sit under a tree or whatever your thing may be, but do something to enhance your experience so that you feel more in control of what you're doing and therefore determine the outcome.
Yeah. Agreed. So, Ridgely, mind types. Let's talk about these mind types. I know that's, if I'm understanding correctly, are mind types the things that you had the avatars for that we worked on a while back?
Yes.
Can we dive into that? Because I remember you were kind enough to, Max and I had this like group coaching mastermind group well before Unicorn Mastermind. That was our unicorn group coaching, and then it eventually evolved into a mastermind. But you were kind enough to do some activities, and it's really cool stuff. I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when you're a kid, initially, you come into the world early on, the only form of communication that you have to indicate that you need something is to shriek and cry. And when you cry, somebody comes and they feed you, somebody comes and they comfort you. But after a while, you start using that shrieking and crying to do anything you want, to get a cookie, to get a whatever, da-da-da. And enlightened parents will say, hey, Jeremy, guess what? You don't get to have anything you want by just shrieking anymore. That would be poor behavior on our part as parents, but you still have wants or needs. And you got to figure out some other kind of way to get those wants or needs met. So you try other activity besides crying. And when that other activity works, it creates a filament of belief every single time. So you try something, it works, filament of belief is created. You need something else, you try something different, it doesn't work, you throw away that action. Try a third thing, doesn't work either, throw away that action. Try that first thing again that did work, and it works again. And now another filament of belief is created. And whenever you figure out what that action is that gives you the success you need for your wants and your needs, by the way, success is a feeling, right? You're going to repeat that over and over and over. And it is going to cement certain behavior into the biology of your brain that in turn develops into a belief system that shapes what I call a mind type. And I determined over the course of a lot of work that there are basically 7 different mind types, and that everybody has a primary mind type, which is your default setting, where you go back to your go-to behavior to get your wants and needs met. And they have a secondary mind type and a tertiary, which better define the way you go about getting what you need. And so it's been really fun for me to put together this body of work and to share it with the world. And it ends up being now representing most of the work that I do in the world is helping people figure out what is their mind type and how does that impact them, what does it mean for them, and what can they do with that information to lead a better life. So in a nutshell, that's the whole process. And they're all right here.
What are the 7?
The giver, the person that wants to make a difference, add value, and contribute to others. The connector, the person who's all about trust, relationships, and bonds. The problem solver, the person that makes sense out of things, clarifies and simplifies things. The innovator, the person that's always looking for a better way to do things. The perfectionist, the person that does things the right way, loves systems, restores order, hates chaos. Contrast that with the rebel, the person that thinks differently, lives outside the box, and challenges everything. And then lastly, the master. The master is the person that loves to take things to new levels, really, really big powerhouse brains. I think if I recall correctly, Max might have been a master.
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe we can retake these, Ridgely. I think it would be good if you're open to it. I would love to, whatever it is, I'll get it for my team. And I think because we do weekly group activities with our team, and I think this would be a fun one to do.
It's super fun because then what happens is when you look at your team members and you don't see them as, oh, they're so-and-so, they're recently married and they got a puppy, right? Instead, you see them, they're so-and-so and they're a connector. And therefore, this is how they view the world. And you can take your level of understanding and relationship to a whole new level in a matter of a couple hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm writing down right now to get access or whatever it is. So is this your primary focus in business right now? Or are you probably, you're like, do you have a few ventures, or this is the primary one?
I have a few ventures like most of us that are in the space.
You can't, do you ever meet anybody one venture? It's like one venture. What?
Really, dude?
Yeah, what? I think I always had more than one. I just started 2 out of the gate. Just I had to be distracted.
Yep.
Yeah.
But what's happened to me is that much of what I do spins off of this one. So, for example, I have a digital agency that does marketing, not in the online marketing space where it's really hard, right? Where you have to do a lot of split testing, but in the offline marketing space, like our clients are, manufacturers of fiberglass reinforced piping for, oil fields.
What's offline marketing? No, I'm just kidding. So what marketing services do you offer for a company like that?
Everything. Like anything you can think of, I have literally 8 different divisions. So I have an SEO division, a paid traffic division, a content marketing division, a social media division, graphic design division, all of it fully fleshed out. But the reason we have such a successful business is because I go out and speak about this, mind types, and how you express your mind type to your point and the point of this podcast, express your authentic, genuine self to the world. And all these companies come back to me and say, hey, can we talk about that? I'd like to talk to you about that. I spoke at an event last Saturday afternoon, put out a thing saying, hey, you want to talk to me about this and how I could serve you? Let me know. And I got 35 requests for consultations from entrepreneurs. 35, which I have not started scheduling yet. I'll start that tomorrow. Wow. I have a team that will schedule them. But I'll speak to 35 entrepreneurs, and I would tell you that at least a third of them are going to want to have a workshop to figure out their authentic messaging.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is I do the front end. I do the limbic messaging based on the mind types, and then I turn over everything else to my team. They handle the paid traffic, the content marketing, social, whatever it may be.
What is limbic messaging? Because I saw you wrote that down too. What is that?
So our brains are pretty unique. Around the perimeter, you have what's called the neocortex or thinking brain, responsible for logic, data, information, features, benefits, words. The fact that we understand each other right now is because of the neocortex or thinking brain. But at the heart of the brain, you have the feeling or limbic brain. And we make decisions based on a feeling, and then we justify the decision with logic. And it always happens in that sequence. First, you decide based on a feeling that you want, like trust or loyalty, and then you justify it with your thinking brain. So most people, when they're doing marketing, what do? They talk about what they sell, what they offer, what they make, and guess what, Jeremy? Nobody cares because somebody down the street makes the same thing. What people care about is who are you? What do you stand for? What are you about? Do I feel good in my relationship with you? Do I trust you and the relationship that we're having? And if I do, then I want to engage in business with you. So I help organizations figure out how to express limbic messaging that talks to the limbic or decision-making part of the brain. And it's our special sauce. So what ends up happening is I have the reverse problem with my company that everybody else out there has. I have too much business. There are too many companies coming in because I go to speak and usually about 80% of the room wants to talk to us about limbic messaging. And then I just pass it on to the rest of the team. And where we have challenges is in being able to service the level of business that I bring in.
For sure. Yeah. You offer a lot of different, you have a lot of divisions, Ridgely, to say the least. When we started Unicorn, we obviously have a couple of e-com brands now. So we do paid media, like for client stuff. We're very like boutique and premium on the client end. And then we have a couple of our e-com brands too. But I couldn't imagine offering all those services. That's what, when we had our agency with Kevin Harrington, that's who we were. And it was, I did not have very many nights of good sleep.
Well, and I will tell you, I personally have been blessed to find some good team members that handle the tech stuff, but I still have to deal with periodically jumping in and handling the problem. And it's like,
if it can be executed, I mean, there's massive amounts of opportunity. I mean, the clients we deal with, they need a lot of help in a lot of different areas. And if you can execute it well, if you have a great team, it's no surprise to me because one division will just end up as lead gen for all the other divisions. Oh, you need paid media? Well, we're going to need new creatives and videos made and stuff like that. And probably going to need new content too. And probably makes sense to just go ahead and redo your store at some point. You know, it's like
that's exactly what happens.
That's what happens. Yeah. So
not to be funny, man, but you know, we end up in situations where I start talking to somebody and they want to talk to me about what is their mind type or what is limbic messaging. And by the time we're done, it's a $40,000 contract at, $3,500 a month. And, you can sell an online digital product at, $1,000, $100, $500 or whatever. It takes a lot of those to bring in recurring revenue at $3,500 to $10,000 a client. And when you can do that and service those clients, revenues go up really, really fast, and the gap gets big quickly. In other words, you got your baseline, whatever the burn rate is, say it's 50 grand a month, but when 51,000 comes in, the incremental amount that it takes to service that is not 1,000 anymore. It's a fraction. So you start bringing in $100,000 a month, and you still have $60,000 in expenses. You bring in $200,000 a month, and now you got $75,000 in expenses. You bring in $300,000 a month, and your expenses are $100,000. You know what I'm saying? The profit margins grow exponentially once you hit that baseline, whatever that is.
Yeah. No, there's money. If you can run an efficient agency, there is a lot of money to be made. It was too much work for me, to say the least. I'm like, let me just focus. I'm sure you've taken the Clifton Strength Finders, but I just retook that. I'm a maximizer, and that makes complete sense. A maximizer, by their definition, is someone that just wants to focus on their own and people's strengths and not worry about the weaknesses. And That sounds like me. I'm just like, this is what we're good at. I don't want to do anything else. And I suppose it served us okay.
It was funny. I was having this conversation literally yesterday morning. I have two partners, and my partners were saying, "What can we do to support you?" And my answer was, "Here's what you do to support me. Handle everything else. I don't need any support to bring in more sales. Zero. Just make sure I don't have to deal with operations. I don't have to deal with client problems. I don't have to deal with all that stuff. You want to support me better? Figure out how to make sure that that's taken care of, and then we're good."
Yeah, I agree completely. If I didn't have to deal with that part of it, the biz dev portion and closing the deals and stuff, I enjoy that actually. But if I didn't have to deal with all that other junk, then I probably would still own an agency at some level, at least a full service agency. But it just, maybe that I started it in my mid 20s, right? I didn't know anything back then. I still barely know anything, but I know a little bit more than I did back then. The avatar formula, who's the ideal client you typically work for with that? Because I imagine it's beneficial to have entire teams do the activity.
Yeah, for sure. My ideal client, the absolute perfect client for me, is a successful business that wants to be more successful.
Okay.
In other words,
we're not a fit.
No, doing well.
I was just joking. I was like, we're not a fit. We don't want to be more successful. So, yeah, go ahead.
No. It's the company that's doing well already, that understands the value of investing in themselves and taking it to the next level, right? It's so funny. I had this conversation. I've got a proposal going out probably after this call when we're finished on this podcast to a company. And I met this guy. I was speaking at an event. He said, "I'd like to talk to you." And I walked out of there saying, "That's probably my best candidate." I spoke to 12 CEOs in a room. That's probably my best candidate. I get on the phone with him. Well, the guy's doing $1 million a week. $1 million a week. That's real money.
Yeah, that's a lot of revenue.
That's a lot of revenue. But of course, that's the perfect client because he's not looking for me to come riding in on a white horse trying to save the day. He's looking for, can you up my conversions by 2% based on your limbic messaging stuff? Can you help me turn a little bit more of this traffic that we're getting into sales, a little bit incremental? Then you're a hero. And that's by far the best client. They know what they're doing. They respect good work. I don't have to explain everything. We just put our team on stuff and deploy it. So the best client for me is a successful company that wants to be more successful.
Yeah, and I completely align with that on our agency side when we will run paid media for brands. I mean, 5 or 10 million is typically the absolute lowest in revenue. And the reason for that is just they have shit figured out and it's not a make or break whether our relationship works or not. We can't be going into relationships where if it doesn't work out, you're going out of business. It's like, hey, we want it to work out, but it could take some time and it's, a lot of testing and it may not work out. We're going to do our best, but, it may not. Somebody that understands that is going to be just a better person to work with. So, yeah, I completely agree. We learned the hard way, taking on a bunch of startups and, it was like, oh, yeah, you'll run ads. It's literally our last 20 grand in the bank account. I mean, worst decision you can ever make to take on that client. All right. Yeah. Ridgely, last question. The Coca-Cola fortune, do you inherit that or what happens with that or what happened to it?
So that's a great question. So my grandmother, Gaga, we called her, that's Theodora Lastly Ridgely, was such a control freak that when her only child, my mom, was doing what she was told, then she had money. And when my mom went against my grandmother's wishes, she was cut off. As in completely, as in out of the will. And so when we went to read the last will and testament of my grandmother, it said, here's the last will and testament. My mom inherits all the money. And then there was an amendment. My mom is disinherited. And then there was a second amendment. My mom is back in again. And then there was a third amendment. My mom is disinherited for the second time. And then my grandmother died and took the fortune to the grave where it still sits today as of this podcast. And my grandmother was such a control freak that the clauses in the will basically created a trust that says if you challenge the provisions of this trust, you are automatically disinherited. And my mother will never have access to the corpus of that trust in this lifetime. And my siblings and I will inherit the money as soon as my mom dies. And my mom is in great health and doing very well. So imagine the phone calls, right? Hey, Mama, how you doing? Good? Bummer. I mean, no, just go cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
But you know what's crazy, man? So let me just add a little color to that. So it's been several decades now since my grandmother passed away. In all likelihood, it'll be a while before my mother passes. At least I hope so. And yes, one day my siblings and I will have a fairly substantial liquidity event. But in retrospect, bro, I am so grateful that happened, because what would have happened to my mom if with no training she'd received all that money? Who would she have become? My grandmother. And what would have happened to us, who also with no training at that time had been a part of that ecosystem? We would have become those kids that I was telling you about early on in our conversation that are miserable. So I'm grateful that we were basically shut out of the Coca-Cola fortune for an indeterminate period of time so as to develop our own lives. And whenever the liquidity event happens, dude, it's not going to make hardly any difference in my world. Maybe I'll buy a couple better bottles of wine than the ones that I'm already buying that are not so bad.
See, Ridgely, we came full circle to that. You have that positive glass half full mindset. I was just saying, you know how many people be like, I got screwed out of this fortune? You're like, I think it was a positive. I think that's a key to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about how many people would have played a victim and been like, man, I really got screwed out of this. But you pulled positives out of it. And I think that's fantastic. And we align on that. So I respect you for that.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting, man. When we, I like to say to friends, I say, when we go to the vaults at PNC Bank in Washington, D.C. and start pulling out the heirlooms like a scarab ring from the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt that somebody smuggled out of the country that now is part of our family stuff. And you look at that and you go, man, I should wear this to a party, man. Just I will at that point thank my grandmother for having a little bit more vision than maybe most of us gave her credit for.
Yeah, well, it was great catching up with you. Good conversation. Anything you want to share before we bounce today?
Yeah, man. It is still a tough time out there for a lot of people. So I have two things that I'd love to end conversations with to remind us all. Number one is a smile is a little curve that sets a lot of things straight. And number two is if somebody needs a smile, give them yours.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate the time with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Magic.
I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the flesh sooner than later.
Yeah, man, for sure, brother. And let me know if I can help with your team.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.